The story begins in a grand ballroom decorated with crystal chandeliers, cascading flowers, and gold-trimmed table settings, everything designed to scream perfection. The atmosphere is electric. Champagne glasses clink. A string quartet plays softly before the DJ takes over, and guests swarm the dance floor, eager to celebrate the union of Madison Carter and her new husband. From the outside is the picture of a fairy tale wedding, the kind that floods glossy magazines or dominates social media feeds. Madison, dressed in a flowing white gown with intricate lace detailing, glows under the warm lights. Cameras flash relentlessly, capturing her smile, her laughter, her radiant beauty. Yet beneath the veil of joy, there is an undercurrent of something darker. Her eyes, sharp and restless, dart around the room as if searching for stability in a moment where she should feel nothing but happiness. To the guests, she is the epitome of a blissful bride, but to the audience, her smile feels too practiced, too strained, as though she's performing a role she didn't fully agree to play. This duality instantly introduces Madison as a layered character, a woman outwardly perfect, but inwardly unsettled. The contrast between the flawless setting and her unspoken discomfort lays the groundwork for tension. The first dance should be the peak of romance, a symbolic moment where two lives officially intertwine before the world. Madison and her husband glide across the floor as guests watch with dreamy eyes. The music swells, and all attention is on them. Yet, as Madison looks up into her husband's face, her focus is drawn elsewhere, a subtle vibration against his jacket. His phone screen briefly lights up, and curiosity pulls her eyes downward. What she sees twists her stomach into knots. "Can't wait to see you tonight." "Don't keep me waiting." The words flash like a dagger, impossible to misinterpret. For a split second, her feet falter, but she quickly corrects herself, forcing grace back into her movements. No one notices, at least, no one in the crowd. But the audience does. The secret is out, and it isn't just a minor red flag. It's a direct threat to the marriage that has barely begun. The irony is biting. This is supposed to be the happiest day of her life, yet Madison has stumbled upon the first crack in her carefully curated fairy tale. Rather than stop, she forces a dazzling smile for the cameras, clutching her husband tighter, as if performing perfection could somehow erase the truth staring back at her. Suspense lingers because the audience now knows something Madison cannot ignore, but also cannot yet reveal. Hours later, when the music has softened, the guests are still drinking and laughing, Madison escapes into the bridal suite bathroom. The mirror becomes her silent confidant, reflecting not the glowing bride her guests still believe in, but the raw truth she can no longer hide. She studies herself, flushed cheeks, lipstick fading, and eyes clouded with betrayal. The message replays in her mind like a cruel refrain, louder than the music outside, heavier than the weight of her wedding gown. The realization cuts deep. She has bound her future to a man who may not have been hers even during their vows. Her whisper is barely audible, but heavy with meaning. "I just married a stranger." The line is not melodramatic. It is an admission of clarity. Madison is no longer the woman swept up in the fantasy of a wedding. She has crossed into a darker reality where love and trust no longer align. This confession, though spoken only to herself, marks the true start of her journey. The audience is hooked because the fairy tale has already cracked in its very first chapter. It's not just about betrayal. It's about identity, truth, and the haunting question of what lies ahead when a marriage begins with secrets instead of promises. That single whisper transforms the wedding from a dream, a ticking time bomb. And Madison's eyes, no longer sparkling with joy but sharpened with suspicion, promise the storm that is yet to come. Madison Carter's life began far from the chandeliers and marble halls she now inhabits. Raised in a modest, middle-class neighborhood, she was the daughter of a school teacher and a mechanic. Her childhood was marked by warmth until tragedy struck early, losing her mother at the age of 10. From that moment, Madison's world shifted. Her father, though strict, tried his best to raise her with discipline and values, but his parenting style left little room for vulnerability. He drilled into her the importance of strength, appearances, and never letting the world see weakness. Though he meant well, his rigidity created in Madison a quiet yearning for something softer, for safety, affection, and unconditional love she had lost too soon. As she grew older, Madison envisioned building her own version of family, one where laughter filled the kitchen and love wasn't conditional on perfection. She excelled academically, worked tirelessly, and cultivated poise. But beneath her polished surface lay a girl still carrying the grief of a stolen childhood. That longing for belonging made her vulnerable when Ethan Carter entered her life, charming, confident, and offering the kind of stability she believed she needed. Madison wanted to believe in fairy tales, in the possibility that love could erase loneliness, and she chose to overlook the unease his presence sometimes stirred. Her backstory is not just one of loss, it is one of hunger, a hunger for a home and love that felt safe, a hunger that pushed her into choices she is now beginning to question. Ethan Carter, at 32, seemed like the answer to Madison's quiet ache for security. A wealthy, ambitious attorney, he carried himself with the kind of confidence that turned heads. Friends and family hailed him as the perfect catch, the man every woman would envy her for marrying. Yet Madison, deep down, noticed the shadows beneath his charm. He had a tendency towards secrecy, mysterious late-night calls, vague explanations, a dismissive shrug whenever she pressed for answers. He thrived on control, often making decisions on her behalf under the guise of knowing what was best. He didn't shout, but the sharp edge of his condescension cut her deeper than words ever could. Surrounding Ethan were those who reinforced his world. Claire, Madison's best friend, was her sole defender, fiery, outspoken, unafraid to call out red flags. But even Claire's voice was drowned out in the noise of Ethan's perfectly curated life. David, Ethan's business partner, was practically his shadow, quick to smooth over his missteps and shield him from suspicion, an accomplice in maintaining the illusion. Then there was Mr. Carter, Ethan's father, a looming figure of cold authority, obsessed with legacy and appearances. His disapproval was sharp, his expectations suffocating, and Ethan often mirrored his father's unyielding need for control. To the world, Madison appeared blessed, surrounded by wealth and privilege. But within that circle, she was isolated, with only Claire daring to pierce the carefully constructed facade. These supporting characters did more than orbit her life. They amplified her entrapment, each playing a role in tightening the invisible chains around her. The present reality of Madison's marriage is less a romantic union and more a gilded cage. On paper, she has everything: wealth, status, and a husband admired by nearly everyone. In truth, the walls are closing in. Her every move is scrutinized, her opinions dismissed, her individuality quietly erased. Ethan dictates the rhythm of their lives, while his family enforces an image of perfection that leaves no space for cracks or rebellion. For Madison, love has been replaced by performance, each public smile hiding private doubts. The stakes of leaving are devastatingly high. Walking away wouldn't just mean ending a marriage, it would trigger a scandal that would ripple through her family's modest world, dragging her father into unwanted shame and judgment. Her departure would be painted not as bravery but betrayal, a disgrace that would fracture her carefully maintained dignity. Financially, she would be left adrift, her independence eroded by Ethan's careful control of their resources. To stay means surrendering herself piece by piece, slowly suffocated in a life designed by someone else. To leave means risking everything she has tried to build, facing ruin not only in the eyes of society but also within her own heart. The tension of her present lies in this impossible bind. Freedom demands destruction, while survival demands silence. It is this entrapment, this delicate, suffocating balance that sets the stage for the battles to come, both external and internal. Madison is caught between the dream of safety that first led her here and the terrifying truth that safety was an illusion all along. And as each day passes, the cost of staying begins to outweigh the fear of leaving. The first crack in Madison's carefully staged world widens one late evening, when Ethan leaves for what he claims is an urgent meeting. The house is silent, sterile in its grandeur, and Madison wanders into his office, a room he has always subtly discouraged her from entering. Curiosity pulls her deeper, and what begins as idle searching shifts into a gut-wrenching discovery. Tucked away in a locked drawer she manages to open, Madison finds documents that shatter her fragile trust. Not just cryptic text messages, but bank statements from accounts she never knew existed. The balances are staggering sums withdrawn, transferred, hidden. Alongside them lies a lease agreement for an upscale apartment across town, dated months before their wedding. Her chest tightens as her mind fills with images of Ethan slipping away into a world she was never part of. This isn't merely infidelity. It is betrayal on every possible level. He has built an entirely separate life, financial, emotional, and physical, while she stood smiling beside him at the altar. The betrayal slices deeper than any whispered affair could. It is premeditated, deliberate, and calculated. For Madison, the realization is suffocating. The man she thought was her safe harbor has, in truth, been plotting a double life. She isn't just unloved, she's been used, deceived, and caged in a life designed to strip her of power. The weight of the discovery presses on her like a tidal wave, leaving her gasping not only for answers, but for a sense of who she truly married. When Ethan returns, Madison's hands are trembling, but her voice carries the sharp edge of resolve. She lays the papers on the dining table, her eyes unblinking. "What is this?" she demands, the words slicing through the quiet. For a flicker of a second, Ethan's mask slips, his jaw tightens. His eyes narrow, but he quickly recovers, cloaking himself in that polished composure he wears so well. "You're imagining things," he says smoothly, as though she were a hysterical child inventing monsters in the dark. His tone drips with patronization, every word designed to belittle rather than explain. When she pushes again, he sharpens the attack. "You're ungrateful, Madison. Do you have any idea what I've given you? Don't embarrass us with these accusations." Gaslighting becomes his weapon, twisting her evidence into supposed delusions, reframing her outrage as ingratitude. He frames himself as the victim of her mistrust, casting her not as the wronged wife, but as the unreasonable, unstable partner. The more she insists, the more he deflects, until her truth feels dangerously fragile under his calculated denials. This is not a man scrambling in guilt. This is a man rehearsed in manipulation. Madison feels the walls of the dining room close in as he raises his voice just enough to remind her who holds the power. His words are less about denial and more about control, a warning that pushing further will only lead to humiliation. The confrontation that should have brought clarity leaves her more entangled in his lies. A brutal reminder that in Ethan's world, her voice was never meant to matter. Later that night, Madison retreats into the bathroom, shutting the door against the suffocating weight of Ethan's presence. The mirror greets her once again, not with the reflection of a glowing bride, but of a woman fraying at the seams. Her cheeks are pale, her eyes red-rimmed from holding back tears, yet within that reflection, a spark begins to emerge. The confrontation has stripped away her illusions. Ethan is not simply a flawed man who made a mistake. He is a liar, a manipulator, someone who crafted their entire marriage not out of love, but out of control. Every red flag she had ignored now roars back in clarity. His secrecy, His condescension, his obsession with appearances. They weren't quirks or misunderstandings. They were warnings, each one a thread in the net he wove around her. For the first time, Madison sees her marriage for what it truly is, a gilded cage designed not to love her but to own her. Her breath hitches as she whispers into the dimly lit silence, "If I stay silent, I'll lose myself." The words are soft, but they carry the force of revelation. They are not just an admission, they are a vow to herself, a promise that her identity will not be smothered beneath Ethan's lies. This is the shift in power, subtle but irrevocable. Though she has no clear plan, though fear gnaws at her from every angle, Madison has taken her first step away from being the compliant, silenced wife. The inciting incident has done its work. Her world has shattered, but within the shards lies the possibility of transformation. The reflection staring back at her is no longer only broken, it is awakening doubt as weeks pass. Ethan begins weaving his control not through open confrontation, but through subtle manipulation that leaves Madison feeling increasingly isolated. He discourages her from seeing Claire, framing her friend as a bad influence who stirs unnecessary drama. Invitations to lunches or outings mysteriously vanish, with Ethan intercepting messages or guilt-tripping Madison into staying home. Finances, once shared, tighten into his control. He ends her credit cards but monitors every expense, cloaking his dominance under the guise of responsibility. When Madison voices her unease, Ethan dismisses her concerns with practiced calm, telling her she's imagining things or letting her emotions get the best of her. His gaslighting erodes her confidence, planting seeds of self-doubt that sprout into silent shame. Seeking comfort, she turns to her father, but his words sting more than soothe. Be patient. Marriage is about compromise. To him, Ethan represents stability, a wealthy, educated provider, and Madison's doubts sound like youthful impatience. Ethan's family is no gentler. Mr. Carter, cold and domineering, reminds her of her role, while Ethan's mother, polished and distant, urges her to be grateful for her fortunate match. Instead of finding support, Madison is cornered, the voices around her echoing one resounding demand: play the perfect wife. The walls of expectation close tighter, forcing her to question not just her marriage, but herself. Despite the suffocating pressure, Madison cannot quiet the gnawing truth beneath the surface. At night, when Ethan is away or asleep, she begins her own investigation. She rifles through desk drawers, scours email accounts, and traces financial records with trembling hands. What she uncovers paints a picture far darker than infidelity alone. Legal documents tied to Ethan's law firm bear signatures that hint at fraud. Shell companies and offshore accounts hidden under layers of secrecy. The numbers don't just suggest personal betrayal, they suggest corruption that could unravel his entire empire. Each discovery deepens the chasm between who she believed Ethan to be and the man she now knows he truly is. Yet, with each clue, Madison's heart fractures further. She feels torn between the need to expose him and the paralyzing fear of what that battle might cost her. Ethan's voice echoes in her mind. You're imagining things. You're ungrateful. Combined with her father's insistence on patience and Ethan's family's suffocating demands, Madison spirals into an emotional tug-of-war. Is she truly strong enough to fight this shadow war against a man with power, wealth, and allies on every side? Or should she surrender to the role crafted for her, burying her doubts beneath the polished image of a perfect wife? Her reflection becomes her enemy, every glance at the mirror reminding her of the girl she once was hopeful, longing for love, and the woman she is becoming, trapped, silenced, yet desperate to break free. The tension snaps when Ethan, sensing her growing resistance, sharpens his control. One evening, as Madison timidly broaches the subject of trust, his smile fades into something colder, sharper. Leaning in close, His voice drops low, not loud, not overt, but laced with venom. You wouldn't last a day without me. The words chill her to the bone, not because of volume, but because of their precision. This isn't a husband speaking, it is a warning, a threat dressed as truth. He reminds her of her dependence, her lack of access to money, her family's modest standing, the scandal that would erupt if she left. The message is clear. She has no power outside of him. Madison swallows hard, her pulse racing, but beneath the fear, a new spark flickers. The more Ethan seeks to crush her, the more she realizes that staying silent will cost her more than leaving ever could. Yet she is not naive. Every move feels dangerous, every word calculated to test her boundaries. She begins living in duality, playing the obedient wife in public, while secretly mapping the labyrinth of Ethan's lies in private. The threat has escalated the stakes. This is no longer about saving a marriage or salvaging appearances. It is about survival, identity, and reclaiming the pieces of herself that Ethan seeks to erase. And though her body trembles at the thought of rebellion, her whisper in the dark reminds her of the truth. Silence will be her undoing, but resistance, however perilous, might just be her salvation. The unraveling of Ethan's carefully curated empire comes in one crushing revelation. Madison, piecing together weeks of quiet investigation, finally connects the dots. Buried beneath offshore accounts and fabricated contracts lies a devastating truth. Ethan's law firm is laundering money through fake clients, their operations woven with precision into the city's financial veins. Every missing dollar, every falsified document points to a scheme vast enough to ruin lives and destroy reputations. The realization strikes harder than any betrayal of the heart. Their marriage was never about love. It was never about building a family or a future together. It was a transaction, a calculated move by Ethan to use her name, her family's modest but respectable reputation, her silence as the perfect disguise for his crimes. Rage and heartbreak twist inside her, but this time she doesn't fold. With trembling hands and burning resolve, Madison gathers the evidence she's uncovered and lays it before him. I know everything, she declares, her voice cracking but unyielding. Ethan's response is chilling in its calmness. He doesn't deny, doesn't scramble, doesn't even flinch. Instead, a slow, cruel smirk spreads across his face. You were never my partner, he says, his words sharp enough to slice through the air. You were my shield. The mask of charm and devotion that once seduced her disintegrates completely, leaving only the predator beneath. In that moment, Madison understands her husband never saw her as a wife. He saw her as a tool, a pawn to protect his empire. The confrontation ignites into something darker, more dangerous. Madison, her hands clutching the evidence, refuses to back down, her voice trembling but firm. I won't be your shield anymore. The words are a spark in dry kindling, and for the first time, Ethan loses control. His polished composure, the charm that carried him through courtrooms and dinner parties, shatters into raw fury. His voice rises, his face contorts, and his words turn venomous. He lunges across the room, his hands slamming against the table, scattering papers like shrapnel. Madison stumbles back, her heart pounding as she witnesses the mask break, the perfect gentleman replaced by a man consumed with rage. His threats spill freely now, no longer wrapped in subtlety, reminders of her dependence, promises of ruin, and hints of violence that linger in his eyes. The fight escalates, the air thick with fear and defiance. Ethan grabs her wrist with crushing force, his control physical now, as though holding her body could silence her will. Madison, though terrified, meets his glare with something new still in her eyes. The perfect bride who once whispered doubts in mirrors is gone. Standing before him is a woman who finally sees him without illusions. The violent turn doesn't just expose Ethan's brutality, it exposes Madison's awakening. She realizes survival means more than endurance. It means resistance, even if resistance carries the risk of everything collapsing. As the storm of the confrontation rages, a voice slices through the chaos. You don't have to fight him alone. Ethan freezes, his grip loosening as both he and Madison turn. Standing in the doorway is Claire, her eyes sharp, her presence electric. In her hands is a folder thicker than Madison's, evidence stacked and prepared. For weeks, Claire had been working in the shadows, her loyalty fierce, her instincts sharper than Madison ever realized. I knew something was wrong, Claire admits, her tone steady, so I started gathering everything I could. His partners, his accounts, the offshore trail, it's all here. Ethan's face twists in shock and fury, his empire crumbling in real time as the women he underestimated stand united before him. The twist shifts the balance entirely. Madison, once convinced of her isolation, realizes she is not alone in this battle. Claire had been anticipating Ethan's downfall all along, arming herself with the tools to dismantle his power. The scene transforms from one woman's desperate fight to a united front, friendship becoming the weapon Ethan never saw coming. His smirk falters, his confidence wavering as the walls close in not just from Madison's awakening, but from Claire's relentless resolve. The moment is more than a twist. It is vindication. Madison, for the first time, feels the crushing weight of her isolation lift. Together, they hold not just evidence of betrayal, but the power to burn down Ethan's empire. And in that unity, the shift is clear. Ethan is no longer the predator. He is the prey. The days following the confrontation are a blur of fear and resolve, but Madison wastes no time. With Claire by her side, she hands over the files, both hers and Claire's, to trusted investigators. For the first time, the lies Ethan built his empire on are no longer secrets locked away in his office. They are evidence weaponized against him. Meetings with investigators stretch into long hours, each signature and statement unraveling Ethan's carefully crafted facade. Madison feels the weight of her silence lifting with every detail shared. Soon after, she takes the next decisive step: divorce papers. When Ethan is finally served, his mask of control falters before the eyes of the world. The man who once silenced her with threats now finds himself cornered by cameras, microphones, and headlines. His reputation collapses with stunning speed, the scandal splashed across every news outlet. The Carter name, once synonymous with power and perfection, becomes shorthand for corruption and disgrace. For Madison, the moment isn't about revenge, it's about liberation. As the media swarms and Ethan scrambles to contain the fallout, she feels the chains of her marriage fall away. Filing for divorce isn't just a legal act. It is the ultimate rejection of the cage he built around her. In signing those papers, Madison reclaims her name, her freedom, and her voice. With Ethan's grip broken, Madison begins the long, fragile journey back to herself. For years, her identity had been suffocated beneath his control, her own desires and passions left to wither. Now, she steps into therapy, a space where she can finally unravel the knots of grief, betrayal, and silence that shaped her life. Each session feels like peeling back layers, rediscovering the woman she thought she had lost forever. Slowly, Madison reconnects with pieces of herself she once cherished: her love for painting, the quiet joy of putting brush to canvas and watching color spill into form. She joins local community programs, lending her voice and energy to causes she believes in, grounding herself in connections that aren't dictated by status or appearances. For the first time in years, she feels present, whole, and alive. The shift is not instant. There are days when doubt gnaws and memories haunt, but she learns to embrace healing as a process, not a destination. Her laughter grows freer, her movements lighter, her reflection less haunted. Madison no longer defines herself by what she endured, but by what she chooses: courage, creativity, and compassion. The empowerment arc is not just external, it is deeply personal, a reclamation of selfhood that was buried beneath Ethan's shadow. The final stroke of justice comes with Ethan's indictment. Fraud, money laundering, conspiracy charges that once seemed unimaginable are now stamped across official documents. Courtrooms buzz with anticipation, the public watching as the man who built an empire on lies faces the collapse of everything he fought to protect. The Carter legacy, once untouchable, fractures under the weight of exposure. His father, the stern figure obsessed with appearances, can no longer command respect. His family name is tarnished beyond repair. For Madison, justice isn't found in Ethan's downfall alone. It's in the validation that her voice, once dismissed as paranoia or ingratitude, now stands as truth. Watching Ethan face prison is not a moment of triumph, but of closure. She doesn't gloat. She breathes. The cycle of control, lies, and fear is broken. With the trial looming and the Carter Empire in ruins, Madison turns her gaze not backward, but forward. She no longer carries the title of perfect wife, nor the burden of someone else's expectations. Instead, she carries herself authentically, imperfectly, but freely. Standing in front of her canvas one morning, sunlight spilling into her new apartment, Madison dips her brush into a fresh palette of colors. This act, simple yet profound, is her final declaration. She has survived, she has reclaimed her life, and she has written her own ending. Months after the chaos, when the courtrooms have gone silent and the headlines have shifted to newer scandals, Madison finds herself in a place she once only dreamed of: peace. She sits at a seaside cafe with Claire, her best friend, and the one who refused to let her fight alone. The cafe is modest, painted in soft blues and whites, its windows wide open to let in the salty air. The clinking of cups and the hum of quiet conversations form a backdrop far removed from the intensity of her old life. Madison sips her coffee slowly, savoring the taste, savoring the calm. She wears no mask here, no perfect wife performance, no burden of appearances. Just herself, open, raw, present. Claire teases her gently, making her laugh in a way that feels unforced, real. The breeze carries the scent of salt and possibility, and for the first time in years, Madison feels the weight lift fully from her chest. This moment, simple and quiet, is victory. Not in Ethan's downfall, not in the crumbling of his empire, but in the rediscovery of her own breath, her own joy. She has stepped out of survival mode and into living. After finishing her coffee, Madison and Claire stroll down to the shore. The ocean stretches endlessly before them, waves lapping gently against the sand, as if inviting her to release the last remnants of the life she's left behind. Madison slips her hand into her pocket and pulls out her wedding ring, small, heavy, and glinting in the sunlight. For months, it has sat untouched, a relic of a chapter filled with betrayal and pain. She turns it over in her fingers one last time, not with bitterness, but with quiet acceptance. The ring is no longer a chain, only a reminder that she survived. Claire watches silently, her eyes soft with understanding, as Madison walks closer to the edge. With a deep breath, Madison opens her palm and lets the ring fall. It catches the sunlight for a brief, dazzling moment before sinking into the waves. The ocean swallows it whole, erasing it from her world, carrying it away into depths she no longer needs to follow. The gesture is not about anger. It is about release. Madison smiles faintly, the corners of her mouth curving upward with peace. The ring, once a symbol of her cage, now becomes her declaration of freedom. As the waves retreat, Madison lingers for a moment, staring at the horizon. The sunlight breaks through the clouds, spilling golden light across the water. In her mind, Words formed not a lament, but a revelation. They told me marriage was about forever, but forever isn't built on lies. Forever is built on truth, and I finally chose mine. Her voice, steady and clear, feels like both a confession and a promise to herself. She turns to Claire, who gives her a nod of pride and solidarity before the two begin walking back toward the cafe. Each step away from the shore feels lighter, as if the sand beneath her feet is cleansing her.